The title of this video is Why You Need to Be Psychic and How to Do It. I spent many years developing psychic abilities for an extremely important reason I want to share with you. I didn't do this out of curiosity, for entertainment, to become a superhero, or to impress anyone, but to discover what I think is the most important and useful tool for accelerating your spiritual evolution, leading to the most enlightening levels of consciousness that you may have only read about or heard spiritual teachers talk about. And I really want you to hear this because there's a lot of misinformation promoted about being psychic. And it's often even taught to be dangerous, but nothing could be further from the truth. But by projecting false information about this topic, it diverts people from having the most significant transformations of consciousness while steering people into time-consuming practices, keeping them locked into systems and groups designed to control them and keep them forever engaged in practices that produce very limited results. The small breakthroughs that people sometimes have pale in the face of what is possible. And I'm referring to practices like visiting with enlightened gurus to bathe in their aura. And I know that can feel good. Passive meditation, such as watching your breath or staring at a candle, rolling your eyes upward and staring at your pineal gland, endlessly repeating mantras in one of the most popular forms of meditation out there, or sitting for days in silent retreats, or reciting a broad spectrum of prayers, lighting candles and incense, doing shamanic ceremonies and doing sweat lodges, chanting, and reading endless lists of books. Now listen carefully. I'm not saying that those things are wrong, that you shouldn't do them. Actually, quite the contrary. They're all useful tools. And I've been involved with all these practices myself over years. They are definitely helpful. But you can go so much farther and so much deeper than most people know once you tap into your psychic abilities. And I'm going to explain why this is true. And then I'll get into some practices that can help you develop a very specific type of psychic ability that can launch your spiritual breakthroughs to the highest experiences and deepest realizations. I've talked to so many people, and I mean by the thousands, who feel like they're hitting a wall spiritually, often even feeling like they're going backward, where they don't get answers and they stagnate in disappointment, feeling let down by all of their efforts and not being able to figure out why. And I can say all of this today because I've dedicated myself to spiritual evolution for my entire adult life. And I have many decades of full-time experience in teaching hundreds of classes, workshops, and retreats, and doing more than 50,000 one-on-one sessions with people for more than 30 years. I've taught hundreds of people in classes how to develop their innate intuitional and psychic abilities, all goal-directed toward what I call vertical enlightenment, vertical evolution, which refer to the journey that we're all on, whether you're consciously aware of it or not. So let me give you a little background first. I think it's important for you to know I had no psychic abilities growing up, and I was in a religion that strongly forbid any psychic practice. They convinced me and other members of that organization that psychic experiences are inviting and interacting with demons and is dangerous and can lead to demon possession. So as a result, I was very fearful of becoming psychic. That was more than 50 years ago. And in that time, I've come to realize the belief that psychic abilities are not dangerous or satanic, That's a superstitious fear out of ignorance and misunderstanding. And if there is any aspect of being psychic that is satanic, it is in the lie that it is dangerous and a great satanic deception. Developing a skill of not just seeing non-physical beings and subtle energy patterns, but coming to understand them and interact with them and learning how to address them can lead you to the purest expressions of unconditional love, peace, beauty, kindness, and sharing the deepest aspects of your soul with many of the most spiritually enlightened beings in all of the creation. I'm talking about the angelic realm and many other highly evolved beings who are just waiting for you to help you, and they want to join you. They live in heavenly realms of eternal happiness, joy, fulfillment, beyond what most people can even conceive of. And so in this video, I'm going to give you a really good foundation of how you can develop extrasensory perception to help you on your spiritual path. There was a major discovery I made decades ago, and that is figuring out what a person is. Now, I know that sounds like a peculiar statement because we naturally think we're intelligent beings and know who we are. And in some ways, of course, this is true. But when you begin to define who you are, you'll find that you are listing many personality characteristics. So we might say that a person is a nice, charismatic personality, and that other person over there has a negative and disagreeable personality. You might then go on to list some characteristics that make each person unique, including things that they've said and done over their lifetime. Now, my question is, where did those characteristics come from? Why are you the way you are? Well, psychologists might say, well, it's hereditary. And other psychologists will say, well, it's environment. And I'd say it's likely a combination of all of that. But where are those characteristics stored? And where are they projected from? So then people would go on to say, well, I think in the brain, or maybe in the DNA. But there are actually quite a number of places where the programs that make up your personality live, and they're not all in your genes or in your brain. You store patterns accumulated from your parents, teachers, friends, and other external sources, not only in your brain, but in other places, sometimes referred to as cellular memory. So memories and characteristics, emotions, reactions, even beliefs can be found in your nervous system, for instance, and in your physical body. For instance, your body records emotion-laden experiences in different parts of your body that were affected by an incident. And this is sometimes referred to as cellular memory. Sometimes when a person is getting a professional massage, they'll have memories pop up of things that happened to them years ago as a therapist works on the area where the injury happened. It's not unusual for this to sometimes happen when energy is stored in the location of the body where the injury was, when it's being massaged, years, even decades later. And often these memories have pictures in them, along with the emotions that were experienced at the time of the incident. So you've undoubtedly have some memories stored in your body, but they can also be in your aura layers and in your chakras. And they're also stored in the form of beliefs in what is known as your causal body. And this is also where karmic energies are located that were implanted there over many lifetimes. And some of them can go back many thousands of years. They can also be in what's sometimes called your timeline or your life stream, which is basically your history across time. The nature of the energy stored in various places are in what are called thought forms, and they are composed of three things: photos of the events, emotions you felt at the time of the event, and the conclusions that you came to about the event. And over a lifetime, or perhaps many lifetimes, there are thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of thought forms. And you experience all of these thought forms interacting at unconscious levels. And they what are form your personality. And you think of them as you. But you also have a higher self or a soul. And this has other qualities and other memories. And ordinarily, you're not even aware of all of these components that make up who you are. But with psychic abilities, you can find them and release the negative ones. The negative ones are usually referred to as your ego personality or your persona, which is primarily formed from information coming in through the five major senses. And then they're processed by your analytical mind. And then they're stored somewhere in your consciousness or in your body or in your mind. And all of these components that make up who you think you are can be refined and purified and cleared to reveal your deepest core truth. And that's your soul. Your soul is that individualized spark of the divine that you were originally created to be. Then, when your physical life started, survival became very important. And as a result, fear-based defense mechanisms came into play to help you survive and be safe and even thrive. And so over time, you forgot that you really are a soul, a spiritual being living through a physical body. And your life became about fulfilling the needs and the wants of your body. And this is where the majority of people live, never even thinking of how they came to be, where they came from, who they are, or where they're going to be in the future. And so they focus on physical goals, acquisition, and these become their motivators. But there is so much more to life than this. And to discover what I'm referring to requires that you attune to realities beyond your five physical senses. And this is where developing psychic ability becomes your greatest tool. And maybe one of the most amazing truths is that psychic abilities are completely natural and innate in everyone. But like any skill, they must be developed. So here they are, natural, made up of who and what we are, and yet there's so much disinformation out there that teaches you to suppress it and fear it. Do you fear your ability to smell or see or taste? Why would you fear a natural ability of your intuition, your insights, your ability to perceive non-physical energies? But this is why most people usually feel blocked or only have occasional psychic experiences, maybe in a dream or a premonition, and all the while unaware that they're composed of non-physical components. I've already mentioned your aura and chakras, and since most people don't see them, they deny them. And a lot of them even go further and ridicule and insult anyone who claims that they're real. I don't know, maybe they feel threatened by what they're not aware of. Maybe they feel such things are beyond their control and they want to be in control. Or maybe it makes them feel intellectually superior by ridiculing and insulting anyone who says that they're aware of such things. And yet they speak so dogmatically about something they're completely ignorant of, and thereby they deny themselves and sometimes others of the greatest understanding you could ever have about life. Now, in order to see subtle energy, it requires an ability to attune to non-physical patterns, which are not seen with physical eyes. But your brain has the remarkable ability to tune into and interface with non-physical realities. But seeing psychically is not like seeing with your physical eyes, and that can confuse and discourage you from doing it. But there are ways you can train your mind and extrasensory receptors to perceive subtle energies. One of the most common questions I'm asked is, why can't I see visual images or feel spiritual energy or hear inner guidance? And you may have asked those questions yourself. In fact, those questions frustrated and perplexed me to no end when I was beginning to meditate more than 50 years ago. You see, I'd read some books about incredible experiences that some people are having with meditation and visualization. But when I shut my eyes to meditate, I couldn't see a thing. All I could see was blackness. And I certainly didn't hear anything. I didn't have any guidance. I didn't feel anything out of the ordinary. So if this sounds like you, I want you to know I understand what that's like. In my case, I went 3 years meditating every day before I was even able to see a simple color pattern with my eyes closed. Now, when I was trying to do this, I didn't have a teacher or even an instruction book. And back then, it was actually difficult to find information on these topics. That was many years before the internet. It was years before personal computers. There weren't even very many books readily available on these topics. So if you've experienced anything similar blocking you, and if it sounds all too familiar, then I have some encouraging news. I learned how I can help you not only be able to hold strong visual images, but also even to see, and I'm putting that in quotes, subtle energy patterns. Because in most cases, it's more like perceiving than like seeing with your eyes open. Now, some people do see very vivid, clear imagery, but the majority of people do not. Most people are conceptual. But there are subtle energy patterns in a person's aura, or as I've already discussed, different locations in your body. Now, why does any of that matter? Well, first, because learning to work with subtle energy is going to expand and shape your view of life to a much higher understanding. Secondly, and more importantly, it will enable you to heal, clear, and remove any negative energies that are blocking you or causing troubles much more effectively than hit or miss methods of more general healing type practices. And I would include healing touch, hypnotherapy, visualizations, Reiki, pranic healing, laying on of hands. You'll actually be able to eliminate very specific negative thoughts and feelings and any other patterns that have been blocking and confusing you. And this is really important because it is all foundational before you can begin to raise your consciousness to the most high levels of peace and love and what is called enlightenment. Developing these skills is a fast track to attaining and, most importantly, maintaining elevated, enlightened levels of consciousness that you're seeking, but rarely achieving. You see, as long as you have limiting subtle programs anywhere in your auric field or in your body or in your timeline or in this causal body that I mentioned, you'll find yourself taking a step forward followed by a step backward. And this is why people who have spiritual realizations during retreats often feel like they lose it when they return home. If you don't successfully, permanently clear the unconscious limiting programming running your personality, you'll revert back to a previous state. Now, the reason you experience difficulties developing intuition is that over time, your mind has been creating all sorts of blocks, filters, barriers, questions, doubts, and disbeliefs. These are all thought forms. They're like programs in a computer. And thankfully, you can be cleared of these once you learn to attune and work with subtle energy. So this is important to know before you begin. If you're primarily interested in developing stronger visual abilities, you can enhance your ability by practicing visualizations, and they help the brain and the mind to get familiar with visual imagery. Often what is perceived with your inner eye is symbolic and not as vivid as seeing with your physical eyes. And so it takes practice to learn to interpret what you see. Most people who develop the skill spend hundreds and sometimes even thousands of hours practicing. But I can assure you, anyone can learn to do it if they're persistent. I know that absolutely because I've personally taught hundreds of people how to do it, and they're doing it today. Well, there's a couple different types of visualizations you need to be aware of. One is the kind in which you determine what you want to visualize. And this is the technique that's often used by athletes who want to mentally practice their event to improve the performance. And many others use positive visualization to instill success images, positive motivation. But there's another type of visualization in which you attune your inner senses to the energies around you or people around you in situations. And this is called clairvoyance, which simply means clear seeing. And it refers to the ability to see subtle energy patterns that underlie what's happening on a physical level. This is a skill you can learn to read the energies in a person's aura, body, chakra system, and other places. And the practices I'm going to explain to you in this video a little later are completely safe. And anyone who says otherwise is coming from stories they've heard, movies they've seen, or superstitious fears they were told without factual basis. In all my experiences, which I can assure you are extensive, in the tens of thousands of hours, I have never felt threatened or unsafe while doing any psychic practice. To help you feel and be more protected, you simply imagine that you're filled and surrounded by bright light. And this is a good practice anyway. And I recommend using golden light. This is the highest vibration of light. You could also use violet light, which is also very effective. You fill your aura by visualizing or just simply imagining or intending and requesting that light to fill you completely, inside and out. Because both violet and gold are very high vibrations, I can guarantee you nothing negative from other dimensions can get through. In fact, they wouldn't even want to try. To develop clairvoyance, it's helpful to have a partner that you can practice with. It's not a requirement, but it is helpful, and it makes it a little easier and perhaps a little quicker. So here's how you would do it. You sit across from each other, and one of you has the intention to attuned to some aspect of the other person, such as maybe you want to scan the person's physical body or internal organs for some health related issue. Now, if you're going to be scanning the physical body, I suggest that you spend some time learning where all the internal organs are and what the systems of the body are and what they look like and where they are. If you want to attune to a person's aura, you could make an inner request to sense and perceive, let's say, the predominant colors in a person's aura. And in the beginning, you may not see anything, but you might get a sense that there's some kind of energy around them that might feel a little heavy, or it might be dark or murky. And that usually indicates something on the negative side. So, for instance, fear or depression can appear gray or cloudy. Anger can be bright red if the person's in an angry mood right then, or if it's old anger, it can appear as maroon. And happiness, on the other hand, can be pastel colors. They can be very light. But regardless of what you perceive, you don't really have any judgment about it. You just say, oh, there's that particular thought form, and I can remove that. Don't rely on what books say the colors mean or the patterns mean, because they can vary. Ask yourself, what do the colors or the patterns mean for the person I'm focusing on? And regardless of what you get, say, thank you for letting me know. What else do I need to know about this? And you can keep repeating that and you'll keep getting more information. And I'll tell you this ahead of time. In the beginning, everyone thinks they're making it all up. So self-doubts emerge, which can only undermine your efforts. And they can make you feel like giving up. But you have to push through this. You have to keep practicing until you get past this phase. It's a phase, and it can last months in some cases. When I was teaching the classes on how to do this, I had to keep reminding the class members, trust what you're sensing. Often what you are perceiving is symbolic and not literal, and that can throw you off even more. Or what can sometimes happen when you're doing this with another person is they'll say, that's not true. I don't have that. These kinds of doubting statements can make you feel like giving up. But in the classes, I wouldn't let them give up. I push them. Keep saying whatever they saw or felt. Explain it. Ask for more information. And over time, you'll begin to understand what you are perceiving. If you don't have someone to do this with you, you can actually do this by simply imagining a person, not physically present, sitting across from you in a chair. And you hold the intention of attuning to the person's body or aura, or the person's chakras, and you desire to see and understand what you can. Ask any negative or blocked energy to appear as a color. And you can even pick the color. You can say, I ask all the negative energy around this person to turn bright blue or maybe bright red. Those are usually the two easiest colors to perceive. Now, you can pick any color. But no matter what you become aware of, you ask your inner guidance, what does this mean? And as I said, most people are going to think they're making it up in the beginning, but with practice, you'll come to realize that you are, in fact, receiving some information that you would have had no way of knowing previously. And with practice, you're going to build your confidence and also your skill. And it is really that simple. Now, I do need to mention, simple doesn't mean quick. We all have the natural abilities, but like any skill, they take time, a lot of practice, and patience to develop being good at it. If you just think of the practice it is to, let's say, to learn to play a musical instrument and to get really good at it, that gives you just some idea of what you need to become skilled at psychic development. And of course, some people are able to do it a lot easier and quicker than others. And just hearing about that can make it frustrating for you if it's not coming quickly for you. Believe me, I know what that frustration's like. It took me years to get good at being able to see and feel and hear and clear subtle energies. But a big part of my challenge was that I didn't have anyone to teach me or explain all that I'm telling you right now. So if you aren't getting psychic impressions, you can sometimes initiate the process by pretending you're getting impressions and verbalize them to yourself. You've probably heard the saying, fake it till you make it. And sometimes this can activate the process and start a flow of information. But you're going to think you're making it up, and then it'll take time before you begin to realize that having these impressions will give you information beyond what you consciously know. So what may start out as some creative story that you think you're making up will sometimes take on a life of its own. Another way to help train your mind with what to look for is put your attention on an object with your eyes open, and then close your eyes and try to imagine it. And if you do this repeatedly, you can activate your visualization ability. You can also scan your own energy. So you close your eyes, you relax, and you put your attention on say, a section of your body or a chakra and ask to be shown the nature of the energy in that area. So you can ask the subtle energies contributing to a problem that you're having to light up with a bright color, like I said, blue or red. And that makes it easier to find the pattern. So let's say your knee is hurting. So you relax, you close your eyes, you put your attention on your knee, and you ask to be shown or explain what is going on with my knee. And then you await for any impression to arise. And once you have some impressions of the energies, you can then utilize a number of methods to shift or clear them. One way is to simply change the color of the energy. So let's say you're looking at your knee and it shows up bright red, maybe because there's inflammation or you have an injury or something there. You can change the color to something like violet or golden by simply using your imagination and your intentions. Another way would be to imagine the lower frequency energy being vacuumed off. Oh, and this is important. You don't need to actually see the energy to understand it or clear it. In the realm of higher frequencies and subtle energy, your intentions are what are affected. Now, another thing to know is that visualization doesn't mean visual images all the time. Visualizations emerge in various, sometimes surprising or subtle ways. And the variation is because people's minds work differently. Some people are more visual thinkers, and they generate very detailed mental pictures, colors, images, diagrams, charts. They can actually close their eyes and see vivid mental movies. Artists, architects, inventors, some athletes, for instance, are really good at this. Another category of people are those who are conceptual thinkers. They don't see pictures or movies, but they receive conceptual impressions, ideas, and even feelings, inner knowing, realizations. And then some people get a combination of images and impressions, falling somewhere between the two extremes. And yet there are some others who even hear or perceive words, and information can come like an inner voice. So they're hearing with their inner ear. So my point here is avoid expectations about how your imagination works. And don't worry if at first images are vague, or if they're different from what you thought. Fixed expectations or worries about whether you're doing it right will tend to block the impressions and the flow. So the idea is to become completely relaxed, open, and receptive to whatever images, impressions, or concepts come to your mind. In the beginning, you may only see shapes or colors and no distinct images, but keep practicing. In time, you will be able to sharpen your abilities. And I have found that with lots of patience and lots of practice, essentially everyone that I've ever known can develop these abilities to be more visual, more psychic, and more intuitive. Now, I want to address the big question that everybody faces in the beginning. What if I don't see anything? Well, often being patient is the most important character trait to develop because in the beginning, it can take many minutes into a meditation or scanning session before you get any insight, or you may not even get any intuitive impression at all in that particular time. And that can be pretty frustrating. It can be even more frustrating if you didn't know this ahead of time, because you'll start doubting yourself. You'll start defeating yourself before you get very far. So for the times you don't receive anything, just take a deep breath, come back to it again at a later time, and eventually you will succeed if you stick with it. Now, let me tell you 3 secrets about this. Secret number 1, it's best to practice when you are in the mood. You've probably noticed sometimes you feel more like meditating than other times. Sometimes it's easier to relax and feel connected to your inner space. If you start a session and it doesn't seem to be getting any traction after 5 or 10 minutes, let it go for a while. Come back to it later. Try again. Don't berate yourself for not succeeding. Who knows? Maybe the stars weren't perfectly aligned for you at that moment. Maybe you had too much on your mind. Maybe your biorhythms weren't synced up. Whatever it was, who knows? It doesn't matter what the reason was. Postpone it and try again later. The 2 biggest blocks everybody faces when they start out: self-doubt and fear. Self-doubt has an inner voice like, you're wrong. You'll never get it right. There's something wrong with you. This is dangerous. Fears are like, oh, I might see something I don't understand. I might see something I wasn't expecting. I might see something scary. You have to be attentive to what goes on in your own mind. Your own mind can interfere. Secret number 2, be very relaxed and neutral and patient. I can't emphasize this enough. Being neutral means that you aren't projecting self-judgments, preconceived ideas, or engage in analyzing anything. In fact, you almost want to be casual about it, almost like, well, I don't care if I get any impressions or not, even though you actually have a subtle intention of being open to receive. Psychic impressions do not come through thinking or trying to figure anything out. The process is not analytical. And yet the mind typically tries to analyze what you're doing, and the mind just loves to spin stories. And they can block, and they can confuse, and they can bring up anything that blocks your impressions or realizations. So if you find yourself saying, I need to figure out what these impressions mean, that is your analytical mind trying to understand and make sense of what you're receiving and what it has no experience with. And so anything it comes up with is going to be distorted at best and probably completely wrong. But when you first begin your practice, you might even find yourself arguing with some of what you're imaging. You might be thinking something like, this is just not me. I'm making it up. Don't worry if this happens. It happens to most people. And it's simply your mind responding to the old subconscious programming that it has been hearing or repeating for many years. As time goes on, the negative self-talk will grow less and less and less, and your abilities will grow greater and greater and greater. In this case, practice does make better. Your ability to see, quote unquote, visualize, attune, or imagine will improve remarkably the more you practice. So prepare yourself to be dedicated to a long-term training program over many months. The first few days or weeks, and maybe even first few months, may not yield meaningful results. Remember, you are practicing to perceive subtle energy with an emphasis on the word subtle. So it's different from what you're used to receiving through your five senses. Now, secret number 3, it makes no difference how your impressions appear. Just as each of us visualize in a little bit of a different way, each person has his or her unique ways of perceiving psychic impressions. There's no need to judge yourself or compare yourself to anyone. One thing I can tell you for sure is that whatever the way is that you receive psychic impressions, it will be different from what you think or imagine it will be like. It will also likely be somewhat different from another person tells you they experience. You see, everybody has a unique background of experiences, and all of those influence the way you receive psychic impressions. Also, because intuition is not a mental or analytical process, the analytical mind cannot formulate how it will be. So all it can do is speculate, and it's almost always inaccurate. Another aspect of this is that no two psychic attunement sessions will be the same. Impressions will come in a whole wide variety of ways. So just be open, be relaxed, be non-reactive to whatever comes in. And over the weeks and the months, you will find that you become quite skilled in receiving and interpreting what you're perceiving. Here's what I can tell you about what you will experience. Impressions can come in a number of ways. So it's important to recognize that seeing with the mind's eye is different from seeing with your own eyes open. It's different from watching a movie. And often you will just see colors or patterns or symbols, or you might see or hear words like an inner voice in your mind. And it might not seem to immediately relate to anything. So in those cases, you can ask yourself, what does it mean? And wait for an answer. Or if you're looking at someone else and attuning to them, you tell them, here's what I'm getting. Does this mean anything to you? And sometimes the answers will come in a minute or two. Sometimes the answers may not come for hours or even a few days later. So don't worry if you don't determine what the meaning is immediately. In time, if you persist with regular practice, you'll get much more detailed information and you'll receive it much more quickly than when you start out. Like anything, the more you do it, the better you get at it. There are a number of factors that can defeat you before you get very far. And it's good to know ahead of time so you don't become defeated. First of all, your own mind disbelieving what you are seeing. I always put seeing in quotes because it is different from seeing with your eyes open. For instance, you might be telling yourself, this can't be right. I don't dare say that. They'll think I'm crazy. Falling for these kinds of voices can derail you before you even get started. A second way that you can defeat yourself is over the amount of time and practice it takes to get good at it. For some people, it is naturally a little easier and quicker, which can only frustrate you more hearing that. But in my experience, anyone can learn to develop a skill if they persist. So if you stay with it, you can actually get quite good at it. And I can tell you when I was teaching classes on developing these abilities, there were 9 6-day classes spread over 2 years, just to give you an idea. Each class was approximately 50 hours, and the participants were taught that they could and should connect with other students in the class weekly over the phone so they could practice what they learned in the class. And most of those attending classes did this, and they did it to further their own spiritual evolution. And they were dedicated, and some have gone on to offer their service professionally. Many of them stayed connected with classmates for decades. And I mention this to emphasize that you need to think more long term if you are serious about developing the skills. So, a fun technique to increase your visualization ability, I've already mentioned, to make it part of your daily practice. Pick up an object, something on your desk, hold it in your hand, look at it for a minute, then close your eyes and try to visualize it. Keep repeating this and go on to larger, more complex items. And you're going to discover that over time, your visualizations will become more direct and precise. They can become more spontaneous, and they can reflect the subtle energies around what you're focused on. For instance, you could pick a flower or maybe a piece of fruit and ask to perceive the aura or the energy field around it. And once you start getting impressions from these items, you can progress to more complex things like maybe animals and people. If you'd like to get better at this, I have 2 audio programs. One is titled Third Eye Activation, and it goes into much deeper and describes other methods and practices that you can use to develop your abilities. There are 7 guided meditation sessions. There are discussions and audible and subliminal programs to support your subconscious mind to open and assist you. And I also have an advanced intuition training program that has even more lessons and training and guided sessions. And these programs are available for immediate download as MP3 audio files on my website, jonathanparker.org. So until the next time, keep on keeping on. Don't give up no matter what. Mastery is worth any inconvenience needed to attain it. I'm Jonathan Parker.